What's up everybody, Brandon here from Gearist, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Agility Peak Flex from Merrell. Now, one of the interesting things about trail running shoes is the flexibility. It's weird how it comes up and how it caters to different tastes. There's certainly some people who want a more flexible shoe, want to be able to rock hop from here to there, want to be able to take a turn really quickly and have the shoe kind of flex with them and give into it, almost like a flexible ski. Then there's people that want a more stiff shoe, a little more pop, something like a road racer. You're going to want something that's going to give that spring back to you. And now this shoe today, the Agility Peak Flex, is obviously named for its flexibility, or one would think, but is it really that flexible? Well, after several miles in it, probably around 55 or 60 actually in this shoe, I've got quite a bit to say about it, so let's get into it. Now, as with all our shoes, we're going to take a look at the outsole first, and as you can see here, this guy mimics the skeletal system of the foot. Now, first off, these are about 5mm deep lugs, roughly, using Merrell's M-Select Grip Plus rubber. This is a proprietary rubber that's meant to be sticky and soft, yet still durable. And those lugs that we see mimicking the phalanges up into the metatarsals and all that kind of stuff, those are separated by 3 flex grooves up in the front of the shoe, there, and then into the rear of the shoe. It doesn't really mimic the skeletal system of the shoe because back there it's kind of just the calcaneus behind the metatarsals, a little bit from the on the ground portion of the foot, and so it wouldn't be that visually appealing. So what they've done is they've rolled over that same M-Select Grip Plus rubber into the rear of the shoe here with a more directionally oriented lug, traditional lug setup. Now, while I'll get into this more in the midsole and ride sections of this review, the outsole is where some of this flexibility begins to take shape. These flex grooves, again, right there, which we see, they do provide a lot of flex in that area of the shoe. They also provide a decent amount of lug spacing in here. Now, they're not the greatest at clearing mud, and I did take this on quite a few muddy runs, or quite a few muddy miles, I should say, but they do an okay job. They can get caked up here and there, so just be aware, just whack them up against the side of a rock or something to clear them pretty easily. Now, the grip of this I found to be really quite good. Again, not the most luggy thing in the world, not the deepest. We've certainly seen deeper lugs, but these are quite aggressive and they're well laid out for me. Now, I found them to really be enhancing even on some more loose terrain and things like that. They did very well, as well as dry and rocky stuff. And again, that muddy stuff that I mentioned earlier, until they get caked up, they do quite well, especially in that slick Colorado mug that we have here. Also, from a durability standpoint, when I wrote the original review for these, I had about 45 miles. Now I have about 60, 65 miles, and the durability is very, very good. We can even still see some of the texturing that are on those lugs right there. They've held up very well, and I can see this being probably easily a 500-ish mile shoe, depending on your gait and the way that you're running, where you're running, the type of terrain. Moving into the midsole of the shoe, this is again where we see some of that anatomical influence come in. It's skeletal on the bottom. The midsole has some nods to the musculature system. What's interesting about that, and I will show you here, but then I'll also show you this picture right here, where it zooms in a little more closely on that midsole, because this is not as in focus as that would be. This is giving you the sense of muscle fibers that run throughout that area. Now, that's mostly in the rear half of the shoe where we see that, but then into the front half of the shoe is where that flexibility begins to come back in. And what we see here in the front half of the shoe are these yellow lines on this particular shoe. These yellow lines here on the medial and lateral side, and you'll notice that those line up with these flex grooves right here. Now, this is kind of leading you visually to know that there is more than just the flexibility of the flex grooves, but these are actually going all the way through the midsole of the shoe. And they actually extend into the top side of the midsole material. So that is actually a cutaway in there where you're going to add that flexibility, which is a very interesting approach to it. The stack heights of 33.25 and 27.25 give a net drop of right around 6mm. And this is including a front and rear rock plate, which I'll touch on in just a second. Now, I really found myself enjoying the feel of this shoe. While it's not the most ground present and ground feeling shoe in the world, it does a pretty good job, and especially with the amount of protection you've got underfoot, it's really in touch with what you're doing as a runner. Now, that rock plate that I mentioned a second ago does a great job of protecting the foot from more pokey bits that are in the ground, and I think that's one of the strong suits of this when it comes to taking it on more technical terrain, and is why I felt safe doing so. And now we get into the rock plate and how that influences the flexibility, which is part of the namesake of this shoe. Now, you've got these flex grooves which go through, which I told you about a second ago. They're top cut into the midsole material, as well as the flex grooves that are in the outsole here, but that rock plate that's in there, that rock plate actually reduces, it feels like anyway, that's what's reducing some of that flexibility. Now, I'm not saying that this is a stiff shoe, and I know for a fact there are tons more stiff shoes out there. But what I am saying is that this reduces some of the inherent flex that you would think would be there if the rock plate were missing. Now, is that a bad thing? Not necessarily. It feels like it's kind of just a normal amount of flexibility. It's not a big deal, but I would not call it a super flexible shoe like the name would kind of suggest. To me, the flexibility is actually kind of neutral. You can see here it's got good amount of flex in the forefoot there. We get into the midfoot, it's quite a bit more stiff from here back. But it's not inflexible at those points. And again, this is one of those taste things. Do you like that super flexy shoe, or do you want something that's going to give you a little more pop? And I really feel like the front half of this shoe being more flexible is going to be that more flexible feel where you're going to get that pop from the midfoot back. So it's a very kind of, it's a wash. It's a kind of neutral thing for me. Now, since the rest of the shoe, the outsole and the midsole are so anatomically influenced, I'm kind of wondering what the upper design is that's printed here. Now, I have to assume, as you can see there, this design that's printed right on there, I have to assume that maybe that's kind of a nod to the nerve synapses or something, the nervous system. If you've got ideas, I'd love to hear those down in the comments below. Not that that matters to the rest of this review, but I thought it was certainly worth looking at. The upper of this guy is made from a mix of mesh, TPU, and a little bit of microfiber thrown in there for good measure. That mesh, the synapse covered mesh that I mentioned a second ago, that is overlaying the majority of it. It's actually overlaid by these 3D printed on bonded overlays that are right here. And I found it to be actually quite breathable. And again, my test for breathable is hold it up. Can you blow through it? Yes, you can, and it blows through quite well. There's quite a bit of airflow. I didn't find myself getting hot, and I did have this on some more warm weather runs. Now, some of those TPU overlays, we can see here, this yellow stuff that's kind of here. It's basically everything that's not the synapse mesh here. It does a nice job. It's well laid out. It's actually quite a thick spot, especially on the medial side. All of this is that bonded overlay. And it goes all the way up into the lacing system, which is going to reinforce that for those of you that like to cinch down on that and really stress that area, or just if you're climbing a lot and you put a lot of stress on the front of the shoe when it goes like this. Now, speaking of the lacing system, in the Agility Peak Flex, I found this really very interesting. This is a system, the OmniFit system, that's been used in other Merrell running shoes before. And in this case, I was just kind of pointing out again, if you're not familiar with it, it's very cool. So what we've got here is each of the eyelets, which you can see here. You've got the set of 4 eyelets, plus these guys up at the top right here, which doesn't incorporate the OmniFit system. Each of those eyelets, the laces don't actually go through the eyelet. What goes through the eyelet are these little yellow strings. These guys right here, which you can see, sorry, it's a little bit out of focus when I zoom in like that. What happens is these are individual lines that go through each of those. And then the laces go through those, almost like a secondary ghillie system. It's very interesting. Those are all sewn to the tongue under this little piece right there, that kind of midline of the tongue right there. It's a very cool system. I found it really allowed for quite a bit of customization, and I'm not generally one who needs to tighten this lace and loosen this lace and make this a 3/4 tight lace. That's not really my thing generally, but I know there are those of you out there who need that more custom fit in your lacing. And this is something that I really found allowed for that. Now, I did read somewhere else where somebody found that they couldn't get the laces to be as custom as they wanted to. I didn't experience that. That's not to say they didn't, but I guess maybe it depends on the foot. I don't know. But I thought it was a really cool setup. At the rear of the shoe is a very rigid Tpu overlay right here. This thing that says Merrell on it, you can see it goes all the way around the back. And again, that is a nod to the muscle fibers that come up out of the midsole. So it's again this kind of like cohesive feel from one into the other. This is a very rigid area, and it does make for a really well-shaped and very well in place heel counter that kept the heel from sliding at all. It's a very good thing in my opinion. I don't really have a lot of heel lift generally, but those of you that do are going to find that this locks down very nicely if laced properly. Staying back in the rear of the shoe, the amount of foam back here is generally, it's an okay amount. It's nice. It's not too much, not super overly puffy, a little more than I would need necessarily, but it's a good, comfortable amount of foam that I think a lot of you guys would like. And moving up into the tongue here, we've got kind of a microfiber overlay tongue on the top side with a little bit of mesh on in the background. It's going to be more comfortable against that foot, and it's a nice thin amount of foam in there. I really like that. And then we've got these bonded overlays that we mentioned here earlier that go up into a nice toe cap. This is pretty protective, pretty flexible. It's not the most rigid thing in the world. If you kick a rock hard, like with any shoe, you're probably going to break a toe. Just don't kick her. I mean, like punter style hard, or field goal kicker, place kicker, whatever. You know what I mean. If you kick something really hard and deliberately with your toe, it's not going to feel great, even though this toe cap from the outsole comes up and rolls over the front to protect those things even further. Now let's start talking about the fit. And first of all, I found that this shoe fit my size 11 foot exactly where I would expect it to, industry standard as far as I'm concerned. In digging around, I did find a couple of customer reviews online that found this to be a little bit narrow. Now, if I'm being honest with you, I guess I could see what they mean, but I did not really find this narrow. I have an entirely average foot, but I know when things are narrow, and this was not that. To me, maybe that was a lacing thing, maybe thick socks. I just don't know. I didn't find that to be narrow. I wouldn't say that it's wide, but it's not narrow to me. At the rear of the shoe, the fit, as I mentioned just a second ago, this Hyperlock lockdown in the heel does a great job of holding that heel in place. And that plays well into moving into the midfoot, where the lacing as well as these overlays that we see, these generous overlays on the medial and lateral side, really lock down the midfoot very well to keep things on the foot and from being swimmy or slipping around on the foot. As we move into the toe box, I felt like across the metatarsal heads, it was just fine. There wasn't a ton of room for wiggle and splay in the toe box up here. So I would, again, as I say with a ton of shoes, love to see a little bit more room up in this area. But generally, the fit is pretty standard and felt good. I had some longer runs in this, which were perfectly comfortable. Now let's start talking a little bit about the ride. And as I mentioned at the top of this review, this is the Agility Peak Flex. So you would expect it to be super flexy. I would expect it to be super flexy. Now, it is flexible, but to me it's standard flexible. It's on the flexible side of standard flexibility, but it's not overly flexy. And again, I don't know that that's a bad thing or a good thing. For me, I kind of liked the pop. I kind of liked the forefoot flexibility a little bit more. But I think that if you're looking for that more flexible shoe, that rock plate is what kind of gets in the way here. Now, I don't think the rock plate should be removed. I love the rock plate being in place, but maybe it could be an articulated rock plate. We have seen that with brands like Tpu Athletic has a great articulated rock plate that they use in tons of their trail shoes, and it does a really great job of not dumbing down the flexibility of the shoe. As for performance, I really had a good time in this shoe. I took it on everything from short, poppier runs to some middle distance stuff to some sloggy stuff, and I had a good time everywhere I went. Now, while it could be a bit of a placebo effect with the musculature, thinking, oh, this is my skeleton working as a foot and all that stuff, I really felt like the shoe did work well with my foot, regardless of the fact that it's not super flexible like the name would suggest. And I will say that I do think this is a fantastic daily driver trail shoe, assuming you have actual trails. If you're getting this just for fire road type stuff, it's really not necessary. This is a bit of overkill for that. But if you've got some groomed single tracks up to some reasonably technical and rocky stuff, this is a great shoe that's going to be able to tackle all of those things. The initial price tag of the Agility Peak Flex from Merrell was $130. This holds in line with that general uptick we've been talking about for a while now, and it's not unexpected. Again, great daily driver shoe. You're gonna get a lot of miles out of it. It's gonna be able to take you on a wide variety of trails. Now, I will say that if you check down the description of this video, we have found it for cheaper in some cases. Granted, that's something like you go to Amazon and the women's size 7.5 in orange is cheaper, but those I do expect to begin coming down because this is going to be listed in those special occasions right now for about $90. Now, it's not just the women's 7.5. I was joking about that. So if you're interested in this, it's worth going and digging around in some of those links to see if you can find it for a little bit cheaper. As I said at the top and the middle and toward the end of this review, this is not quite as flexible as the name would suggest. However, it's still a really fun shoe. It's a great all-around trail killer that's going to be able to take on your smooth trails, your more technical trails, and it's going to be very durable and resilient along the way. In any event, this is a great daily driver shoe that I think a lot of people would have a lot of fun with. Now, guys, before I get into the question of the day, please subscribe to our channel. We need to hit 15,000 subscribers really soon, and we're about 13.5 right now. You guys have been so great, so one of the things that you can do for me is help share our channel. Post it to your Facebook, post it to your Twitter, post it to your Instagram, whatever. Tell your friends about the outdoor gear you're buying using our reviews. Post a review to an individual video, whatever you want to do. Now, if you want to see an individual product reviewed, let us know. If you want to hear us do an Ask Gearist segment, let us know. We're actually working on something about the proper way to do a, I'm not going to tell you, I'll tell you later. So if you have any questions, you want to see something answered, let us know down in the comments section below by emailing info@gearist.com or simply by reaching out to us on one of the socials. Just search for Gearist and we're right there. Now, our question of the day for you is, how flexible do you like your trail shoes to be? Not road. I want to hear how flexible you like your trail shoes to be. Do you like that pop? Or do you like it to be super flexy so your foot can work around things a little bit more? Let us know down in the comments section below. Guys, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us today. It really means the world, and we will see you very soon.